All right, we'll be getting started here for the last session of the day. So this session is titled Building Home Ownership Opportunities. So over here to my left, we have Travis Seymour. He's a Mohawk of the Mohawk territory of Akwesasne. He is a FCPA, FCGA with Certified Public Accountants of Ontario. He currently serves as the acting executive director for the First Nations Market Housing Fund, which now has their head office located in Akwesasne. Since 2018, Travis has served as the director of finance and administration for the FNHC. Prior to working for the fund, Travis worked for First Nations across Canada through various jobs he has held. Travis has worked for organizations such as the MNP LLP, the First Nations Financial Management Board, Aboriginal Healing Foundation, and Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. Travis also holds the designations of Certified Aboriginal Financial Manager from AFOA Canada, as well as the Certified Government Audit Professional from the Institute of Internal Auditors. Travis currently lives in Akwesasne and enjoys outdoor activities, such as camping and fishing. So please welcome Travis to the stage.
Thank you. See if I can get my slides up here. Okay, Sewakwego. Deyolongyate Youngets. My name is Travis Seymour. My name is Deyolongyate. So I'm from Akwesasne. I'm Akweslono. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for inviting us and allowing us to give this presentation. One thing that caught my eye when I was reading the program was that this is an event for First Nations by First Nations. And I think that's really important because that's the direction that the Market Housing Fund is going, that we are now, it was part of the creation of the fund was that the fund would eventually be taken over by the communities, by First Nations. And we're actually seeing that starting to happen. Before I begin, I would also like to acknowledge that we are in the Robinson Superior Treaty territory, and the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of Anishinaabe. So the things I'm going to talk about today, there's three parts. I'm going to start by just talking about the fund, the Market Housing Fund, who we are and what we do. Then I'll get into the meat of the presentation, which is talking about home ownership and some opportunities for home ownership. And then the last thing I'll do is talk about some of the changes that are happening at the Market Housing Fund. So the First Nation Market Housing Fund, I'm just curious how many people in the room are already familiar with what this is, what this organization does? Can you show of hands? Okay. Oh, okay. I guess not as many people as I thought. So I'm glad I've got a few slides that I can just give a description of what the organization is and what we do. So as I mentioned earlier, we're a First Nation organization working for First Nation. We are a not-for-profit trust that was established in May of 2008. The government of Canada set aside a fund of $300 million to establish the fund. In 14 years, the fund has grown to a value of close to $400 million. We use the earnings from that fund to pay for things like capacity development related to market-based housing and home ownership, and also to pay for our administration. We are kind of a self-sufficient organization, which means we don't rely on grants or program dollars. It's an Indigenous-led organization with 9 Indigenous trustees from across Canada. We have about 11 employees. We currently work out of 2 offices, Ottawa and now Akwesasne is our new head office. So we're located on reserve. And we are hiring. We plan to hire an additional 10 people over the next several months. And we're open to hiring from regions across Canada. And one thing we learned from the pandemic is that you don't have to be in the big cities anymore to do a job. You can do your work from wherever you're located. The Market Housing Fund was designed to support housing loan arrangements between First Nation and lenders. And the reason is it's more difficult for a First Nation member to get a mortgage if they cannot use the land and the house as security on a mortgage. To get a mortgage, in many cases, the First Nation needs to guarantee the mortgage. For the First Nation Market House Fund, what we do is we support the First Nations to qualify for our program, credit enhancement program. And we invest in capacity development projects. So today we have over $1 billion in loan credit set up through different agreements we've got with First Nations across Canada, which would potentially cover the construction of 7,000 home loans. If anybody's got any questions as I'm going, just raise your hand and I'll just stop and try to answer it. So what we do at the fund, we've got two main products. One's capacity development, the other one is credit enhancement. Under capacity development, that's designed to support a home loan program. Products and support to assist the First Nation to meet its goals to implement or expand a home loan program. Examples of projects that we've funded in the past include housing policies, land use plans, land surveys, comprehensive community plans, strategic planning, matrimonial real property laws. In addition, we've supported governance initiatives such as drafting finance policies, HR policies, org reviews, election codes. The second product we have up there is our credit enhancement program. What that is, a 10% backstop for home loans guaranteed by the First Nation. So the way it works is it's basically a guarantee on a guarantee. The clients that we work for, the First Nation we work for, at the end of the day, it's the First Nation providing a guarantee on the mortgages that are part of this program. The CE backstop is a guarantee in the event of 10% in the event that they don't meet their obligations if there's a default. To date, we've never had to use that. Every First Nation has where they had to back up the guarantee, they backed up their guarantees. So the benefit of this program is leverage to negotiate with the lenders, possibly to get lower interest rates, reduced program access fees, risk sharing, and setting up administrative arrangements between the First Nation and the lender, which then allows on-reserve loans to happen. The third thing that we have up here is that we oversee the trust. And so we hire professional investment managers to oversee the money that's in the trust, the $300 to $400 million. And so that's a big part of our work, is to make sure that we protect the main dollars that were put in there, so that there's money generated for future projects, future growth, and future development. So next, I'll talk about the second part of my presentation is to talk about homeownership opportunities. And this is in regards to, we did a research project in this year, actually. And the reason we did a research project is our board of directors, our current board of directors have been in place for about 2 years, and they've given us the mandate to go ahead and make changes. And so they want us to get a better understanding of what are the barriers to homeownership and what kind of services could we consider supporting in the future. So we did a survey that was geared to that question. It's like, what are the barriers to homeownership? So we conducted a survey, and a national survey of leaders, administrators, and homeowners. So you can see from this chart, we got representation from across Canada to different degrees, but it was a good, fair representation of the population. And the questions that we posed were all geared around homeownership. So we started our surveys by having a clear definition. What is homeownership? And the definition we gave to the survey respondents was homeownership refers to a housing situation in which owners pay for the acquisition, operation, and maintenance of a home. And then what we did is we put a diagram together to kind of map out or try to envision what is a housing continuum look like? How does the First Nation kind of advance and do more things and have more options for housing? And we put that continuum so we communicate to the people filling out this survey and ask them to tell us where does your community fit in this housing continuum? And this is what we came up with. This is what it looks like, what we consider to be a housing continuum. And so that the different steps of the first step, you have some communities, First Nation communities, that they don't have a lot of options for housing. You're either homeless or you get free housing. So there's that level. The second level is they might have some subsidized rental as another option. And then they advance the next step. Now they have maybe market rent housing. So comparable rents that you would see off reserve. And the fourth level, maybe they introduce rent to own housing. So now people are actually having some equity invested in their housing options. And the fifth level is where you actually see some home ownership in addition to all the other options for housing available to the members. This housing continuum doesn't have to stop there. It could go even further. You know, we didn't even ask the question, but in April, we had a strategic planning session. We had one of the lenders present, and he said that we asked him the question, does the bank always need to have a First Nation guarantee to provide mortgages on reserve? And he said, not necessarily. He said if the environment was right for that community, that they probably wouldn't need that guarantee. If they had laws in place to protect the lender and the borrower, and the First Nation community was behind those laws, then maybe you could get away from those First Nation guarantees. And maybe it was just be the resident applying to the bank to get a mortgage and not having to involve the First Nation at all. So that would be, I think, maybe a level 6, where we get to that point where we don't have to be guaranteeing every mortgage. It's really based on the creditworthiness of the individual on reserve. So these are the results when we ask that question, is where do you fit on this housing continuum? Of those surveys, 18 to 20% currently have homeownership as an option in their community. And so I think as an organization like Market Housing Fund, we need to think about, why is this only 20%? How can we make that bigger? How can we help communities migrate from the 2 to the 3 to the 4 to the 5? And I think over the last 14 years, that's been our approach, is we're not going to get a lot of home ownership if we don't pay attention to the other steps that they have to go through to get to home ownership. It's a long process. So I think for performance measurement in the future, we're going to monitor that, how many communities that actually offer home ownership as homeowner loan programs in their community. So just some general takeaways from that chart is that leaders and administrators have a relatively similar understanding of the current situation. They have the same opinion that the community should be moving in that direction of migrating and having more options for housing and eventually having more home ownership in the community. Any questions? I think I'm going too fast. All right. The next question we asked was, is home ownership a realistic option in the community in which you work? And a large percentage said yes. Do you think it's a realistic option? 93% of the leaders, 86% administrators. So when I say administrators, I mean like staff at the council office, like the executive director, the housing manager, that kind of thing. And so again, the leaders and the administrators really believe that home ownership is a possibility. They believe that you can have that in their community. And I think of like little side conversations I've had with people, and it's you kind of start to get depressed when you hear, oh, we'll never have home ownership here. There's all these problems. But I think back to my grandparents who managed to build a house and farm without any support, any government program. So I really believe that housing happens whether or not we have programs available. Like if there's a will, there's a way. People will build houses, and they've always done that. So I think that's why there's kind of like a belief in First Nations that, yeah, housing can happen and home ownership can happen if you're willing to work for it and work hard for it. So can community members afford home ownership? That was another question. And once again, the overwhelming response was that in most cases, there are community members that can afford to be homeowners. But unfortunately, in many cases, the only option for housing is social housing programs. Even for those who can afford to pay for their own houses, they don't have access to a housing loan. They have to go through a social housing. So again, that's where there needs to be organizations or bank programs that kind of enable that to happen, enable the people that can afford to pay for a house to do so. So the next question we asked was, what plans does the First Nation you serve have in place to support home ownership? And so on here, I know it's really in real small writing, but there's examples of, these are like projects that we would support, capacity development. So a lot of communities have strategic planning. They know, yes, that they have that comprehensive community planning. Those are very popular in First Nations to get those in place. But on the downside, where there's a lack of knowledge about capital facilities plans and infrastructure development plans and land management plans. So I think this is for us, for the Market Housing Fund, this is kind of gives us an idea. Maybe these are the programs where we need to like focus on are those infrastructure development plans and capital facility plans to get more First Nations doing that type of work. On this next slide, we asked some open-ended questions, and we got some really interesting comments from the respondents. So we asked the question to the leaders, what are some of the barriers to home ownership identified by First Nation leaders? And here were some of the comments. It's small, so I'll read it to you. Our members, they don't realize or know that their home is an asset to them. They don't think of it as an asset. CPs and entitlement. The government is supposed to build a home for every First Nation citizen on reserve by the Indian Act policy. The lack of knowledge of this opportunity and that it's even an option. This is the first time I've heard all about this myself. I'm a chief and don't have a place to call my home on the reserve. I'm renting a place in the city. I believe this information is passed to the community members. Those that can afford it would take the opportunity to own their own home. And the last comment on here, federal and territorial government enslave our people with programs like income support. So the less you do, the more help you receive. People who hold jobs and try to do it on their own are left to suffer, while those who use the system are able to get free housing and buy nice vehicles. So those are not my comments. That's basically right off the surveys. Then we get in trouble here. So we asked a similar question, a little bit different slant, geared to the administrators. And these were some of the ideas that they came up with, or where we put them in different categories. what are some of the top barriers identified by the administrators to home ownership? So the top one was lack of information about how to get into home ownership. The second highest, having bruised credit or no credit. The third one, lack of down payment funds. The fourth one, lack of a stable income. Next, members view buying a home as complex and cumbersome. The next one, members do not want to pay for housing and they don't believe they have to pay for housing. And the next one, little experience with banking sector. So when we see that kind of those ideas, it really helps the fund to focus, where can we improve? What services can we provide to make the situation better? And the next question of the people that we surveyed was, are there any citizens in your First Nation that have built their own homes on the reserve? And 54% said yes. And that goes back to my comment, like there must have been a lot of people able to build houses before they had band offices and governments and programs. So it doesn't surprise me. And I think also when you have economic development happening, you have small businesses, you've got private money, people are able to make their own money and they will build their own houses as well. So housing happens. When I moved home from going to school, I started my own business in Akwesasne. And it was kind of funny because everyone was saying to go to the Department of Economic Development, they'll help you with your business. And after a couple of years, I realized that business happens regardless of what Economic Development Office does. It's really all in your hands of what's going to happen. And the same thing with housing. I came home, my mother said, you better put your name on the housing rolls because it'll be 10 years before you get a housing loan. I was like, I don't have 10 years. I'm going to have kids like next year. Like, I'm not going to wait 10 years. So I think a lot of people they don't have that luxury of waiting for the circumstances to be right. They take action and they make it happen. The next question that we asked was, does the First Nation you serve have land available that is suitable for home ownership? And so we had quite a few say, yes, there's available land. In fact, many of them said that there were even service lots available. So that was the feedback we got on that one. This next chart, in what ways does your First Nation support home ownership in the community? And some of the top ideas that came from leaders were, well, we have a rent-to-own options for people that rent and own their own house. They have service lots. We have laws, policies, and standards that ease the pathway to home ownership. We provide grants, homeowner grants. There's programs through mainstream banks and credit unions. So those are the factors that kind of are, I guess, some of the more progressive First Nations are offering. When we asked the similar question to the administrators, some of the feedback they gave was, well, we provide assistance with getting a piece of land in the community. So that was one of the top reasons for getting home ownership. They help the members with putting their loan package together. There's financial education classes, one-on-one homebuyer counseling, financial coaching. Maybe at the bottom level is they don't provide credit coaching or not much credit coaching or how to repair bruised credit. So again, these are ideas as the Market Housing Fund where we're concerned about what can we do to change what we offer. We'll take the ideas from this type of feedback. So the next question we asked was, would any of these solutions help increase home ownership in the community in which you work? And we asked the same question to administrators and leaders. And so we looked at the research, and there are things on here that we can do to help First Nations? We can do more programs to support homeownership policies. We can revise our CD program. Is there something we can do around down payments? We can provide credit counseling and budget assistance training, and also maybe even access to Indigenous financial institutions. One of the key strategic priorities is for us to work with other like-minded organizations that want to get into lending to First Nations, like the Aboriginal Financial Institute, like NACA, are thinking about that. And if there's a way for us to work with them, then we will. The next couple of slides are what kind of feedback do we get from the actual homeowners in First Nations. So the first one, did your First Nation provide a subsidy grant towards your home purchase? 15 said yes and 12 says no. So a little bit more than 50% of those homeowners did get some type of money to help with their home purchase. Next question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how prepared were you to participate in the process of financing your home? And so about 70% said, yeah, I was prepared and had my act together. We asked the question, how did you pay for your home? A lot of them paid cash. That was the number one reason. Some of them borrowed from mainstream banks, a loan. Some of them borrowed direct from their First Nation. For example, some First Nations still have these revolving loan programs. Some didn't pay anything. Maybe it was gifted to them. Some of them used equity from selling a previous house. Some of them even used a credit card. And in some cases, they used a combination of these ways to pay for their house. 6 of them got money from 2 sources, 3 got money from 3 sources, and 1 got money from 4 sources. This is the last question that I'm going to present on our survey. What motivated you to become a homeowner? And these are like answers that are relevant all across Canada. Overcrowded living conditions with family and underdeveloped, banned housing was very inadequate. Due to shortage of housing, my children can modify any way they want the way it is designed. I didn't want my child to grow up in a temporary housing. I started a family, I needed housing. The band gave me the home, but I pay mortgage on it. To obtain the space where I can continue and improve my outlook on life so I can become a more productive individual, better contribute member of the community. Having a stable home will definitely become a place of learning and positive encouragement for my visiting family members and visitors. So these are direct words from our survey respondents. Are there any questions? No? Sure.
Very good presentation so far. I don't know if you're going to go into this for the rest of your presentation, but based on the result of the survey, the lack of information surrounding home ownership was identified as the major barrier and very significant. Is there an organization that's mandated to disseminate information to First Nations people about home ownership, or does your organization have a role in that? And what are some of the strategies that you think could get that information out there so people can become aware of the different avenues that they can use to own a home?
Yeah, definitely a good question. And I really believe that's part of our mandate. The Market Housing Fund is to be the cheerleader for home ownership and to get the word out to all First Nations that it is possible. A lot of people, leaders, administrators, individuals really believe that it is possible. And our strategy is that where we've not lived up to expectations in the communications and marketing and getting the word out. So that in the business plan, which we just developed for next year and the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot more visibility of the fund promoting home ownership. But we can't do that ourselves. There are a lot of other organizations out there, and another part of our strategy is to partner with those and to work in collaboration with other organizations, and also to use the tools that are now available that allow the communities to network with each other. We can have webinars and we can have mentorship, communities helping others, understanding how to get through home ownership. We have consultants in the field, including Scott Flamen, who gave an excellent presentation earlier, who we send to First Nation communities to put on education programs about home ownership. Yeah, so we have a lot of ideas and strategies to address that. But like I said, it'd be better if we partner up with other organizations, more effective. Yeah, okay. So we're going into the final stretch here. This is the third part of my presentation. Changes at the First Nation Market Housing Fund. I'll start off with a quote here from Walt Disney. He says, "The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing." And so every time we put another business plan together with a bunch of strategies, I always go back to this thought. It's like we cannot over research. We can't research it to death. We'd have to take action and start making changes. And fortunately, we have a board of directors who have really given us that mandate to go ahead and start making changes. So I'm going to start talking, at a high level about some of the changes that we're proposing to make. One is we're going to change our focus on home ownership. It used to be on the credit enhancement program. All of our services were geared to pushing our clients into getting approved for credit enhancement. Now our focus is on just getting people to accept home ownership and to put programs in place for home ownership, regardless of whether they use our CE program or commercial banking or ministerial loan guarantees. We really want to be the cheerleader for home ownership. And we want to help move First Nations up that continuum, up those 5 steps. The next is, as we saw in the presentation on the survey results, more focus on the homeowners, helping those that want to become homeowners. What tools do they need to achieve that? We need to balance the services, the CD services we provide between the policies of the First Nation with helping individuals. Just in general, improve the services that we currently provide. So review our CD program, and I always ask the question, does it lead to more housing options for First Nations? I find I've only been in this role for a few months. Our approach to capacity development was kind of like a shotgun approach. We would just fund whatever came across our table, and it doesn't necessarily lead to home ownership. But now that we have this as a new focus, that's where we're going to go, is we're going to be asking that question. And develop new products and services. There are, from those lists, from the feedback, from all those respondents, we're going to expand beyond capacity development and credit enhancement to move those First Nations along the housing continuum. So these are, at a very high level, this is how we propose to change the fund. Some other changes that are more on the governance and administrative side of things. Our home office is now located in First Nation. So this is, I believe, is going to help us to recruit more Indigenous employees. I think it's important for us to have a good number of Indigenous employees because that's how our clients are. We need to make sure that we have Indigenous employees. We have Indigenous trustee opportunities. Like some of the terms of our current trustees are coming to an end. There's going to be openings coming up over the next few months, at least 2 openings. So get the word out. If someone wants to become a trustee to put their application in, they could go to our website. That's where we post our notice of opportunity. CMHC will also be helping us to get the word out on opportunities to be a trustee. Staff changes. So we have new management. There's an executive search that will be is now underway over the next 2 months. Someone that wants to be the next executive director, encourage them to apply. Again, that'll be posted on our website, but also through the firm that was selected to do the search. And we have job opportunity as well, like a lot of organizations. We have probably 10 positions that we'll be staffing over the next year. And I have a few examples of those positions. We will be staffing another senior program officer. So I have a couple of our program officers are here. housing navigator positions. We have 2 of those, a director of programs and services and a financial analyst. Those are at the top positions that we are currently staffing. So again, those postings will be available on our website. We brought copies. If you come to our trade show, you want to see what the job description looks like, I can share that with you. In addition, we work through some consultants that provide similar work as Scott. Gail Joe is working with our organization out in BC. And we've got Ryan Rice in Kanawaga, who's also working as a consultant for us. And our team, the Market Housing Fund team that's at this conference, myself, and then we have Nancy Pine sitting in the back there, Lucille Michaud sitting next to her. And tomorrow we also have Jason Haskett will be joining us. So those are the people that we brought to this conference. It's a very important conference for us. It's important for us to get out and talk about what's happening at the fund. And again, to be promoting homeownership. My last slide, Nyongoa, thank you for coming to my presentation. And I welcome your questions, or you can ask me questions at the trade show tomorrow. Is there any questions now?
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. One question I have is in regards to survey costs. So that was one of the barriers for our First Nation, for people who wanted to build, is they didn't have land of their own. So they would say my uncle or family member have a piece of land, but it's not severed. So that was one of the costs, which would put them about maybe $3,000-4,000 to get a piece of land surveyed. Is that something your program will be looking at to cover?
Yeah, we fund that. And I'm surprised that a lot of First Nation weren't aware of that. When I worked for the Mall Council of Akwesasne, I oversaw the Office of Vital Statistics and Membership. And I know that we had a lot of disputed lands, and the survey was always the issue. Nobody wanted to pay for that survey. So I know that's a big issue. And when I joined the fund and I realized we have been paying for surveys, you know, it definitely supports homeownership. So that's something we will support. So, yep. Good question.
Questions? Oh, one more.
I just want to talk about, I guess past loans are people who are utilizing the home ownership and are accessing loans. Is there limits? Because I know, is there limits to the loans, or how does that vary? Does it go community to community, or is there a blanket coverage?
Yeah, so what we do is we set up these agreements for our credit enhancement program. And in it, the First Nation will determine the criteria for how much individuals can borrow. So we've noticed, because of the increasing cost of materials, that building a house has become more expensive. So we've seen requests come in to make it a bigger amount. So I've seen some in BC, 500,000, 300,000 to 500,000 loan amounts. So through our CE program, we do have a financial analysis on how much could they guarantee. We look at their own source revenue and a bunch of other financial metrics to determine what's the maximum they could request to cover under the CE program. And if the increased loan amounts are still within that upper limit, then we usually would approve something like that. Yeah, so it is predefined as part of the setting up the CE agreement. Yep. Okay, there's a lady up here.
Just out of curiosity, you're speaking of a lot of the on-reservation home ownership.
Mhm.
Are you going to branch out to off-reserve band membership? And if so, you mentioned about 7,000 mortgages that you're currently affiliated with. So what how do you see the next 5 years or so?
Okay. I know that the board has discussed the need to go outside or look outside the box. You know, there's a lot of First Nation people that left their community and are living off reserve. What can we do to support them to build a home? Because like in my case, I did move away and I built up equity, and now I'm putting that equity back into the reserve home. I'm coming back to the reserve because now I can work from there because of technology. I think over the next 5 years, if we make these changes and really move away from the initial model of the market housing fund, we will see substantial increases in home ownership and more houses getting built and support for people living off reserve. So my answer would be yes to everything all the ideas you just asked about is being considered. We're considering everything. Yeah.
Questions? Not seeing any hands. So as Travis mentioned, he'll get the trade show tomorrow. So if you have any questions that you think of tonight, yeah, come by and see Travis. Good job, man.
Thank you.
Got a gift for you.
All right. Thanks. Okay.
Okay.